But anyway, our discussion today, in our discussion today, we will share the basics of the requirement of what is needed to prepare yourself to defend your proposal. Whether you are a PhD student or a master student, that is secondary, but we will be talking mainly about what are the components that you need to prepare when you want to defend your proposal. Let me share my slides here, which I will share with everybody later. Basically, what we will be looking at today, hopefully, inshallah, at the end of this workshop, we will be able to, first of all, understand the various parts of proposal, what you need to have when you prepare your proposal. That's the first part. And the second part is, hopefully, at the end of this session, we are able to prepare all of you to defend your research proposal. So there are two things here. One is we are going to talk about what would be the content of a proposal. And number two, once your content is ready, how do you prepare yourself in the session where you defend your research proposal? Now, it is also very important to understand that what we are talking about today in this workshop would be based on the format of proposal used in UPSI. Okay, I do understand that if, for example, if you're doing a PhD, you may come from various backgrounds. For example, you may have done your master's elsewhere, not in UPSI. Similarly, you may have groups, postgraduate students groups, which may consist of students from many universities. And please bear in mind that different universities may have different requirements in terms of preparing the proposal. Okay, so again, in this workshop, we will be focusing on the format that has been prepared for UPSI, right? So if there are some differences, please be aware that this is the UPSI format. All right. Now, in this, so those are the two objectives that we would like to achieve at the end of this workshop. Like I said, there are two parts. One is talking about the components of a proposal, and the second part will be talking about how do you prepare yourself for the in defending your proposal. But in greater detail, in this workshop, these are the things that we will be talking about. Number one, we will be talking about what is actually a proposal, and then what does it contain? What is the content of a proposal? And number three, we will be talking about how is your proposal evaluated. So when the examiners look at your proposal, what are the aspects that they are looking for in the proposal? And finally, some tips to do before, during, and after defending your proposal. So these are basically the four subtopics that we will be discussing in this workshop, and I hope that you will be able to gain as much as possible and ultimately be able to prepare yourself to defend your proposal successfully. Now, before we talk about defending your proposal, of course, you will need to prepare a good research proposal. Now, when we talk about a good research proposal, well, a good research proposal is very subjective in the sense that you as a student may find that or may think that your proposal is really good and it's good enough. However, the definition of a good research proposal here does not only lie on how you feel about your proposal. Uh, Rather, it depends on whether your supervisor feels that your proposal is good enough to be defended. So that is why, in most cases, I'm sure many of you may have experienced this. In most cases, you will have your supervisors telling you to keep on working on your proposal, keep on polishing on your proposal, keep on doing necessary changes to your proposal. He or she, the supervisor, may not allow you to defend your proposal yet. And most of the time, this is because the supervisor feels that the proposal that you have prepared is not yet worthy enough to be defended for many reasons, for various reasons. For example, maybe the problem statement is not very clear. Maybe the research methodology is not strong enough. It's not clear enough. Maybe because the instrument used does not align with the objectives of your research, and many other reasons. Yeah, many other reasons. And you must understand that when you defend your proposal, you are not only bringing your own name, but you are also bringing your supervisor's name when you present your proposal. So that is one of the reasons why some lecturers or some supervisors may feel that your proposal is not yet worthy enough of defending. So this is a normal process. Yeah? Please do not be disheartened by this. Please do not feel demotivated by this. Please take this positively and keep on reviewing and making necessary changes as advised by your supervisor. So that is the first thing that you need to understand. Yeah. Before you defend your proposal, you need to prepare a good research proposal. So in order for us to prepare a good research proposal, we need to understand what is a proposal, right? So basically, in a very simple term, a proposal is actually a piece of, in our context, this is operational definition here, in our context, a proposal is actually a piece of document which deals with the following things. Okay, so these are the things that the proposal should deal with. Number one, the proposal should be talking about the proposed research, meaning what is the research about? So that should be contained in the proposal document, right? What is the research about? Number two, the proposal should also explain to everybody, to the examiners especially, what is it trying to find out, or what is it trying to achieve? So what is the research? So what is the research about, and what is this research trying to find out, or what is the research trying to achieve? So that is the second important thing or important element of a proposal. The third is how it will go about doing that. Doing what? Doing achieving the objectives or finding out whatever it wants to find out. How will it be done? Okay. And of course, finally, what we will learn from this research and why is it important for us to learn this? So if you look at these four things or these four elements of a proposal, basically, when you talk about the what is the proposed research about? You're basically talking about the topic, the topic of the research. You're talking about the background of the study. You are talking about the problem statement and the purpose of the study, which is linked to the second part, which is what is it trying to find out. That would be the purpose, the objectives, the research questions, and if you have hypothesis, the hypothesis. So it would clearly explain to people what is the aim of the research. What are you trying to find out from this research? What do you want to achieve from this research? And if you look at the third element, how it will go about doing that, this is talking about methodology. This is talking about, all right, this is what my research is all about. These are the things that I want to achieve, or these are the things that I want to find out. So the third part is talking about how are you going to get those things? How are you going to find out about those things? How are you going to achieve those objectives? So basically, we are talking about the research methodology here. And finally, what we will learn from it, we are talking about expectations of the research. What do you expect from the research, and why it is important to do this research? So basically, you're also talking about the significance of the research, the importance of the research, which you will also need to include in your proposal. Who will it be important for? How will these people learn from this research, and how will these findings help them to achieve whatever? For example, to improve the education system, to improve the education policy, to improve the education practice. How is this particular research will be able to do that? So that is the fourth part of the proposal. All right. Sorry. Now, because there are international students in this group, so I'll be using mainly English in this workshop. However, if you have questions, if you have things that you're not clear about, if you need to clarify certain things, please stop me and ask questions. It can be in the Malay language, or it can be in the English language. Okay, but for the benefit of our international students, I'll be using mainly English language in this session. Okay. Now, the next thing that we want to talk about is the focus of our proposal. Now, focus of proposal here is talking about basically the kind of research that we can conduct, and therefore the kind of research proposal that we can prepare. So basically, there are quite a number of types of research that we can carry out. Therefore, there could be quite a number of quite a number of types of proposal that we can prepare. For example, perhaps the most common one would be the empirical social science research. The empirical social science research is basically talking about what is happening in the world, or what is happening around us. We want to observe what is happening around us, and we want to find data or information about what is happening around us. And this data can be obtained through various methods, through various approaches, which I'm very sure you are familiar with, the quantitative research and the qualitative research, which we'll be talking more about later. It can also be in the form of theoretical research. It can be in the form of analytical research. It can be in the form of conceptual philosophical research, or it could be in the form of historical research. So this could be some of the focus of our research proposal. And because you have different focus and different types of research, therefore, your proposal also must be aligned to the kind of research that you're doing. So the proposal should be focusing on the kind of research that you will be conducting, right? Now, let's look at data for empirical research. So basically what we will be doing for our PhD, our master's degree, would be empirical research. And in doing empirical research, we need to have data. Well, for doing any research for that matter, we will need data actually. So when you talk about data, we can look at data from a very broad perspective. Yeah, from a very broad perspective. But suffice to say that we can categorize data into two well-known categories, which are the quantitative kind of data and the qualitative kind of data. So, as we all know, the quantitative kind of data would be usually presented in the form of numbers, But the qualitative kind of data will not be presented in the form of numbers, usually in the form of words, in the form of descriptions, in the form of narratives, and so on and so forth. So this would be the major difference between the quantitative and the qualitative research. So therefore, if we are talking about quantitative research, meaning we are talking about empirical research where the data are in the form of numbers. And if we are talking about qualitative research, then we are referring to an empirical research where the data are not in the form of numbers. Most of the time, they're not in the form of numbers. Doesn't mean that you cannot have numbers at all, but numbers will not be the main focus of the kind of data that we want to use in our qualitative research, right? So that's regarding data for empirical research. Now, having said that, we have various types of research. I've introduced to you what is proposal, what is research, what kind of research you can have when you're preparing your proposal, and then I have zoom into two types of empirical data, which are the quantitative and qualitative data. Now, those are general information that will fall into whatever level of research that you're doing. Okay, whatever research that you're doing, because in doing research, of course, we have various different scopes of research. For example, at this university, at the highest level of our research category, we will have those students who are doing PhD and EDD, right? So PhD and EDD students are actually at the highest level of scope of research, in the sense that they are doing doctoral research, which may require them to do an in-depth study about a particular phenomenon and so forth. All right, so that's PhD and EDD. Next to that, PhD and EDD, you will have students who are doing masters. So students who are doing masters may be slightly, in terms of scope of research, may be slightly lower than PhD and EDD students. However, it also depends on what kind of mode you are doing for your master's degree. For example, if you're doing a mode C, which later I will share with you the characteristics. Yeah? If, for example, you are doing a mode C master's degree, your scope of research is just slightly higher than degree research, where it's basically a project paper, right? But if you're doing a mode B a master's degree, which is referring to a mixed mode degree where you have coursework and you have research, then the scope of your research would be slightly higher than mode C, right? And this is also reflected in the number of credit hours that each mode or each research is associated with. And of course, the highest level in most in master's research would be the mode A research. So these are students who are doing masters purely by research. And in terms of comparison, mode A students, the scope of research for mode A students is slightly below PhD or EDD research. So it's quite high actually when you're doing master's mode A research. So in this university, in UPSI, those students who are doing PhD, EDD, master's mode A, and master's mode B are required to defend their proposal before they can go to the next level, before they can go and collect their data, and before they can do the analysis and so forth, right? So only those who are doing PhD, EDD, Master's Mode A and Master's Mode B will be required to defend their proposal. So therefore, if you are doing Mode C here, you will not need to defend your proposal. However, there are cases where, depending on faculties and supervisors as well, there are students who are doing Mode C who will be asked to also present their proposal. For example, in FPE, for example, we do have a colloquium session where all our master's Mode C students will be asked to basically present their proposal. And the purpose of doing this is so that we the supervisors especially, will be able to get familiarized with the project that the students want to do, and ultimately will be able to guide them properly on how to go about doing it. But however, please remember, it is not a requirement for students, for master students Mode C, to defend their proposal unless the faculty or the supervisors ask them to do so. Then they will have to do it. So if you've been asked, if there are any Mode C students here, and if you've been asked to defend your proposal, please take it positively, because it is good for you and it will help you to further improve the project that you are going to do, and perhaps it will also minimize or reduce the time that you will take to complete the project, because you are being guided properly from the beginning by your supervisors and the faculty. Right, so now let's go into the detail of the research proposal, the anatomy of our research proposal. So basically, these are the things. Remember, we are talking about UPSI's format, yeah? So basically, these are the things that you need to have when you are preparing your research proposal. Of course, you need to have the title of your research. And in UPSI, we would require that our students prepare the 3 chapters when they submit their research proposal. We would require our students to prepare chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3 for the proposal, as well as the list of references that they have used, and also the appendix. Usually the appendix will consist of, for example, the instrument that you will use, the survey questions that you'll be using, or any other materials that you feel you need to append to help the examiners to further understand what your research is all about. So we would require you to put in the appendix. For those, for example, for those who are doing qualitative research, for example, they may also include the interview protocol or the interview questions, for example, in the appendix, or the observation checklist that they will be using in their research, or any other materials that might be relevant or that might be useful for examiners to further understand your research should be included in the appendix, right? Now, sorry. Okay. Now, before we move further, we need to understand the process of doing research. This is very important for everybody, so that you will be able to see what are the steps or what are the processes that are involved when you are preparing your proposal, and later on when you want to complete your research. So this is an example of a simplified model of research, and this one is for the qualitative research. Yeah? So this is for qualitative research. Now, of course, if you look at the diagram here, the figure here, you will see that there are 2 major sections, right? There are 2 major sections. The first section is called the pre-empirical stage, and the second section is called the empirical stage, right? Now, the pre-empirical stage is where you have not yet, this is the stage where you have not yet talked about data collection, what kind of methodology you want to use, analysis, and so forth. So that is pre-empirical stage. You have not yet included those parts. So if you look at this figure diagram, you will see that, of course, you will begin with a research area when you want to prepare your research, prepare your proposal. You need to think about the research area. And usually this research area is broad. Okay, the research area is usually broad. For example, if even for HLP students, for example, you will have a huge research area, but you cannot do research just by looking at the research area. You will have to refine the research. For example, if you're talking about the research area of education management. Sorry, I'm from the Faculty of Management and Economics, so I'm also from the Department of Educational Management, so I'll be using that as an example. So let's say your research area is educational management. Okay, now educational management is a huge area. meaning you will have to decide what within the educational management area, what would be the topic of your research. So this is the first stage that you need to take. This first step that you need to take before you prepare before you go on and prepare your proposal. And in order for you to be able to refine from the research area to the topic, you will need to do two very important, well, basically one very important thing, which is to read. That's why you will see in this figure, in this diagram, that literature comes very early. Literature comes very early, even though literature review is in chapter 2 of your proposal and also your thesis. But literature is the most important thing to do, whereby you will do a lot of reading to understand the issues that are relevant in your context. So it looks as if we have two things here, but actually they are incorporated. So you do literature review within the area, within the research area. You know, you are trying to refine the research area so that you can come up with a topic. So you do literature review, but at the same time, you also need to think about your context. So your context here is, of course, number one, Malaysia. Number two, maybe you zoom into your locality. Number three, maybe your nature of work, you know, or whatever. But the context has to be considered when you're doing literature review, because when you do literature review, you are not confined to only reading about the research area in Malaysia only. You will be reading from the international literature, meaning you will read a lot about that particular research area from the perspective of American scholars, American researchers, or British researchers, or Indonesian researchers, or Thailand researchers, or whatever, various parts of the world. But in order for you to prepare your own proposal, you need to contextualize it. You need to look at your context. Like I said just now, our context, we are firstly talking about the context of the region or the country. And then, you know, other aspects come in. So that is the first thing that usually we will have to do before we can decide on the topic or the title of our research, and then, you know, move further in preparing our proposal. Right. Then, based on the literature review that we have carried out, based on the topic that we have developed, of course, in the earlier part of your proposal, you will have to provide, again, based on your literature, yeah, you will have to provide the background of the issue or the background of the study. You will have to provide the problem statement. What is actually the problem? What kind of problem that exists that requires you to do this research? You know, by doing that, by refining that, then only you will go to your objectives and research questions, right? So that is the empirical, the pre-empirical stage. You know, you identify your research area, you do a lot of literature review, you contextualize your literature review, you refine the title or the topic of your research, and then you develop the purpose of doing the research objective, the research questions, and if that, in this case, there is no hypothesis, but later you will see another model with a hypothesis. So this is the pre-empirical stage. Now, Of course, once you have prepared your purpose of study, your research objectives, and your research questions, the next thing that you will have to do is you need to think about, how am I going to answer my research questions? How am I going to achieve my research objectives? So that will come under the empirical stage, where you start thinking about the design of your research. What would be the design of your research? And when you talk about design of the research, you are basically talking about the beginning of chapter 3. No? You're talking about the beginning of chapter 3, where you start talking about the philosophy, the design perspective, and what kind of design you are going to use. And then you talk about who will be involved, who are the participants, and so on and so forth. And then you talk about how you will be collecting the data, using what approach, using what technique, using what tools, to collect the data. Once you have decided on the kind of data that you want to collect and how you're going to collect the data, you'll have to move further and talk about how you are going to analyze the data. Okay, using what kind of analysis, what kind of tools to analyze this data. And of course, ultimately, in doing your research, finally, you want to, the reason why you do this research is you want to find the answer to your research, and that will come later. So that will complete the model of research that you need to, you need to use as your guideline when you prepare your proposal. The only difference or the only limitation here, when you look at this model of research, is when you want to prepare your proposal, you will not complete the empirical stage, but you will stop at data analysis. In the sense that you will not be doing data analysis, but you will be explaining how data analysis will be carried out. Okay, so if we look at the other model, which is a model of research with hypothesis, which is a quantitative research, then you will see that there is a slight difference. Of course, the early process is similar, whereby you will definitely think about the research area and you want to refine the research into topic, the research area into topic. You will have to do a lot of literature review and contextualizing your literature, and then you have to have, then you develop you share the research problem, the background of the study, and so forth, and then you come up with the objective, the research questions, and the hypothesis. So the hypothesis here is used to test certain theories. So that's why you have theory here, whereby you certain theories say this, so you want to use this particular research to test whether what has been said what has been claimed in the theory is true as well in the context of your research, in the context of your participants, the people who are involved in your research, right? And the rest are similar in terms of the process of doing research. And again, if you compare this model with the previous model, you will see that the major difference is in terms of hypothesis, and at the end, you want to not only find the answer to your research questions, but you also want to test the hypothesis that you have developed. Now, when you want to do a research, definitely you will be basing your your research on certain premise, and usually this premise is related to theories that people have developed, right? So that is the common thing to do when you do research. You will be looking at certain theories. Now, however, if let's say you are doing a qualitative research, and specifically let's say you're doing well, let's say grounded theory, for example, then you would be advised not to be influenced by certain theories, because your purpose of doing that research, of using that technique, that methodology, is to explore and to discover new things, for example. Therefore, if you go into the field with certain theories, then that theories will influence your thinking. You know, so that's why if you look at most qualitative research, and specifically certain very specific methodology, if you're, like I said, the example that I used just now, grounded theory, sometimes even ethnography, we do not refer to theory because the theory will influence our observation and our thinking. And usually grounded theory research is done to develop theory. You know, so you go to the ground, you want to observe what's going on, so that at the end you will be able to develop a theory. So I know the answer is a bit long-winded, but what I'm trying to say is you cannot simply say that you must have a theory, or you do not need to have a theory. It's not as simple as that. It depends on what you are doing, what kind of research you're doing, and what you are trying to achieve from your research. So before we go into the content, of the proposal, each part of the proposal, I just want to share with you the descriptors. You can actually download this from the website, yeah, from IPS website. This is very important, and it is very useful for everybody. If you have, I'm sure a lot of you may have downloaded this. If you haven't, please make sure you download. But never mind, I will share with all of you this material later at the end of this workshop. Now, this is very important for every student to look at, depending on which level of study you are now. If you're doing PhD, for example, so this would be relevant to you, the number of words and so on and so forth. But what I would like to show you is, remember I said just now, you have to understand which level of study you are, so that you will understand also the value of the research or project paper that you're doing. For example, if you're doing PhD, okay, the credit hours of your research is actually 80 credit hours, right? So it's huge. 80 credit hours is huge, and you will need to come up with a research that is aligned with the value of that 80 credit hours. If you're doing master Mohd A, for example, so that is 40 credit hours. Mohd C, the project paper, is only 8 credit hours. So you have to understand this, so that you know the kind of effort that you need to put, so that they are aligned with the value of the project. Okay, and then you also need to understand this, the proposal defense process. For example, if you're doing your PhD, the proposal defense will consist in your proposal defense session, you will have two internal evaluators, all right, and one only two internal evaluators for proposal defense for PhD level. Of course, in the Viva later on, you will have external as well, right? And then what you need to complete before you can defend your proposal. So meaning in your proposal, you need to complete 3 chapters, right? 3 chapters in your proposal if you're doing your PhD. And it is also advisable, but again, this depends on the faculty that you're from and your supervisor, yeah? But in general, the proposal also requires you to do the pilot study. Okay, meaning you need to already carry out your pilot study on the instrument that you want to use, right? So I hope everybody understands this. Yeah. For the proposal, we require that you also include your pilot study, where you actually test your instrument. Okay, right. So then, like I said earlier, you will have 3 chapters to be submitted for your proposal. And these are the 3 chapters, chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3, right? We will look at these chapters one by one after this. But at the moment, after looking at this, is everybody clear about the requirement of your proposal? Another thing that you also need to remember and understand, I'm sure the guideline has given you this, and your supervisors may also have informed you this, but sometimes students forget the title of your research. You need to limit the wording, the number of words for your title to 15 words, okay, to 15 words only. But of course, if you have acronym, certain acronym, you may write them in full, but they will be considered as only one word. So those are slight technical issues that you can talk to your supervisor. But the most important thing is, please remember, it's supposed to be only 15 words in the title of your research. Okay, if we do a qualitative study, do we require to do a pilot study? Do we need an ethic permission? Yes, you do need ethic committee permission. For your pilot, you don't have to. For pilot, you can carry out, but for the research itself. Now, for the qualitative study, the reason why you want to do the pilot is because you want to test whether your interview protocol is understood, how long it will take to do the interview, and so forth. Yeah. But yeah, ethic committee permission has to be requested. Okay. Right. So, like I said, we are now going into the proposal itself. So these are the things that we need to have in our chapter 1. So in chapter 1, we will have to include our introduction. Now, my advice when you're preparing your proposal, and of course, guys, when you do your proposal, try to do as properly as possible following the format, following everything, just like you're writing a thesis, so that you don't do things twice. Okay, so follow exactly like you are preparing for your thesis, because later on you can just use this proposal and add up a few things, and it becomes your thesis, rather than doing it differently, not following the formats and so forth, and then later on you have to do a lot of changes. So that will be a waste of time. All right. So in chapter 1, you will have the introduction, and my advice to you in the introduction, this is where you introduce your chapter. So it will be very short, one paragraph maybe, but to introduce chapter 1. So, for example, you just say, okay, in this chapter, you will cover this, and this. That's it. Okay, so that's my advice. But again, you must make sure that you follow your supervisor's advice. You talk to your supervisor and see whether he or she agrees with that, or some people want introduction to be long, where you introduce the topic. So it depends. Okay. Once the introduction is finished, then you go to the background of research. This is where you do not talk about your problem yet. You just give the background of your research. So here you'll be talking about, for example, the research area. I always use my own example, which is education management. So maybe in background of research, I talk about the importance of education management, for example, what are the challenges that is faced by education management, blah, 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 blah. And then I zoom into the problem that I'm going to focus on, which will be in the problem statement. So background of the research is not the place where you talk about the problem. It's actually the place where you introduce the research area and the research topic or focus without talking about the research problem. So research problem will be mentioned in the problem statement. So when you talk about the research problem in your problem statement, I'm sure a lot of you will have experienced the fact that your supervisor keeps on telling you that the research problem is not clear, the research problem is not clear, which is very, very common. Because if the research problem is not clear, then it's very difficult for people to understand why there is a need to do this particular study. All right. So look into the research problem to make sure that it is clearly stated, and it will also link with your objective and research question nicely. So, by the time people reach the end of your research problem section, okay, when people are reading your proposal, by the time they reach the end of your research proposal, they should be able to sort of say to themselves, oh, okay, I can see what's the problem, because it's very clear. So when they read the objectives and research questions, they would sort of agree, say, yeah, these are the things that you need to look at, because you have already mentioned it in your research problem. Some of the issues with student proposal when they write their research problem is that, number one, is because the research problem is not clear, or number two, the research problem is talking about something else. Research objectives and research questions are talking about something else. They are not aligned. So that is another issue. For example, when I read a particular research objective, then I ask, where did you discuss this in your problem statement for this particular research objective, for example, or for this particular research problem, research questions, for example? My question would be like, because I didn't see any discussion made in the earlier section, in the problem statement section. So I would ask, why this become an objective? Why is this something that you need to find out? What is the problem? Because it was not mentioned in the problem statement section, right? So I hope you understand what I mean. Yeah, the research problem is actually referring to the questions that you want to answer. Okay, the questions that you want to answer by doing this research, or the problem that you want to solve. So that is, if you bear that in mind, that should be the guideline when you're writing your research problem. Highlight the issues, the problems that need to be answered, which you will list, the questions you will list later in the research questions. But this is the place where you explain about the problem that you're facing, which becomes the reason why you want to do this research. Okay, right. Usually, this is the way where we construct our research problem. We have our field of study. So we look at the literature. What does the literature say? What does the theory say? Or what do theory say? And then you limit the scope of it, because you cannot study the whole area of research, but you have to limit the scope to certain specific area. And then you talk about the what kind of research or what kind of problems exist in that particular area, in that particular topic, and then you develop your problem statement. Okay, so that could be the steps that you can take when you're preparing your problem statement in your proposal, right? In order for you to also, this is also something that will help you to identify or guide you on how to come up with a good research problem. There are certain criteria that you can refer to. For example, the issue that you want to bring up in your research problem should be something that is very significant to the field. For example, if people are talking about leadership nowadays, I would always tell my students to not do research on educational leadership so much, because there are so many research on educational leadership. Unless you want to talk about something very specific, which can be significant to the field. For example, not many people do research on teacher leadership, for example. So then that would be an issue that you want to talk about. What is the issue that teachers face in order for them to practice teacher leadership, for example? So that is something that is significant to the field, rather than something that is being discussed routinely by everybody. Okay. Another criteria which is quite impossible to achieve, which is original. Now, there is nothing original in doing research. Believe me. You may find that, you may feel that, oh, I'm doing something that nobody has done before. Don't be surprised that you will be, frustrated by the fact that many other people have done whatever you are doing. So what do we mean by original here? Original here is in your context. Okay, you look at the issues that you're facing in that particular context, and you come up with a research problem for that. That is already considered as original. But don't think that when we talk about original, it's something. Sometimes people have the tendency of saying, "Oh, what is so significant about your research? Everybody has done this research. It's not original. What is the novelty?" People like to use these terms, and give a very general definition of the terms and make students feel pressured. So, for example, your research does not have any novelty. Novelty meaning something new, and students feel that, oh, I need to, when I do research, I need to come up with something new, which is impossible. Original, new. There's nothing is new in the world. Everything is modified. Nothing is new. Everything is modified from something else. So we are not that clever, actually. So we are, good at imitating and reconstructing, recycling, those kind of things. But that can also be considered as new. novelty already. So don't be worried so much about the issue of novelty, new, and so on and so forth, yeah? Or original. What it means here is something that is in the context of your research. Novelty means something that may be modified. It's not. It's not. It's not wrong to replicate studies carried out in other places and to carry it out in your place and becomes original to your place. So it's fine, okay? But come up with something original. Please make sure that when you talk about your research problem, you are talking about something that can be solved and something that can be implemented. Sometimes we want to do research when we highlight the issues in the research problem, the examiner or your supervisor may look at it and say, you cannot do this. You cannot do this, meaning maybe because it's very difficult for you to gain access to data. It's very difficult for you to gain access to certain people to interview and so on and so forth. And therefore, it cannot be implemented. So you have to be realistic. Look at the research problem. Don't try to solve the problem of the world. You can't. So be practical about it. Look at something that can be implemented, something that can be solved. When you discuss your topic and your research problem, please try to look at issues that are current, issues that are currently going on. And issues, because when issues that are currently, when you talk about issues that are currently going on, automatically it becomes something that people are interested in, rather than talking about something that has been going on for the past 50 years, like, leadership just now. You keep on talking about transformational leadership, or instructional leadership without giving any new breath into it, then it's not current anymore. And people are not interested to look at it anymore, because people would simply brush off and say, I've read so many research on the transformational leadership. So, okay, make sure that you look at something that is really current, which automatically will make people interested to know about the problem and the research. Okay, significance of the study must be included in your proposal. You have, in order for you to write your significance of the study, you of course first need to understand properly your problem statement. Okay, by understanding what is your problem statement, by knowing what the problem, what problem are you trying to solve, by knowing who will be involved in your research, you will be able to talk about the significance of the study, because the significance of the study is actually talking about this. It's talking about what is so important that you do this study, because if I do this study, I will be able to solve this problem. If I do this study, I will be able to help these people who are involved in the study. If I do this study, these people will be benefited in this way, for the study. So that's why usually in the significance of the study section of your proposal, you will write from general to specific contribution. For example, you will talk about the nation first. How is it important for the nation, if there is anything you want to talk about the nation? How it is, when I talk about nation, meaning you're talking about the national level. Maybe you're talking about the policy level, and so on and so forth. Then you narrow it down until the individual level. How this research is significant to the individual teacher, for example, to the individual student, for example. So that's how you discuss or arrange the significance of your study in your chapter 1 of your proposal. Right. The scope and limitation in your proposal is talking about what is basically, when you talk about the scope, you're talking about what the study will cover. Okay, what the study will cover. And when you talk about limitation, you will talk about what limits the study. What actually limits the study? For example, because it only uses for example, because it only uses quantitative, because of that, you cannot go in that, for example. So there is a limitation. Or because it's using qualitative method, therefore you cannot reach to more people, for example. So that could also be the limitation, batasan kajian, the limitation of your study. Now, scope and limitation is very important because you want to draw a line. Okay, you want to draw a perimeter to tell people that, okay, my study is only concerned about this. So please don't ask me about other things that are not related to this study because these are my limitation. Okay, even time can also be considered as limitation. For example, because you only have a certain duration of time, that is the only window that you have to collect data and so on and so forth. So that can also be included as your limitation of the study. Yeah, right. Theoretical framework is talking about how. I think we talked about this earlier a bit when somebody asked me whether we need to have theories, do we not need to have theories and so on and so forth. Assuming that we need to have theories, the theories are used so that they can become the lens. Like I'm wearing this spectacles, so I'm looking through this theory. So that theory will help me to look at things from its perspective. So therefore, if you're using a particular theory, let's say a Maslow theory, okay, so you're going to study you're doing a particular research using Maslow theory. So you must make sure that you include all the domains, all the elements that you have in Maslow theory in your research, because you are going to use that lens to look at the issue. This lens, you're going to look at, this is Maslow theory, you're going to look at the issue through it. So you must have all the elements there. Because if you talk about the theory, but you don't include the elements of the theory when you look at the particular issue, then there's no use of using that theory. Right? So that's why in your theoretical framework, you have to explain what specific theories that you're using, okay, in order to help you to understand this particular issue. And usually the supervisor, the examiner will ask you how they are related or how do they fit into the theory in terms of the domains and whatnot. Right. And of course, you also have conceptual conceptual framework. And the conceptual framework is usually a map, it's a map of how the research will be done. So the conceptual theory is where, for example, you will show how the variables, the various variables in your research link to each other, connect to each other. How do they function in your research? So that's the map. For example, if you have IV, DV, whatever other variables, you will have to label them and show where they are and how they are linked to other variables. So that will become the map of your research. So that is what a conceptual framework is all about and has to be included in your proposal as well. Now, the next content that you need to have in your chapter 1 is called operational definition. Now, please remember that operational definition is not dictionary definition. Okay, it is not the dictionary definition. Operational definition is where you want to define certain terms in the context of how it is used in your research. So if in your research, student refers to those who are in the secondary school only, for example, so that will be your operational definition. It's not a dictionary definition given by Oxford or whatever. All right. And how do you get this operational definition? Usually from literature, from previous research, from theories, and so on and so forth. And what do you include in your operational definitions? Usually in the operational definitions, we will include the variables of our study. So what variables do you have in your research? It must be definitely included in your operational definition. Okay, so after that, you will have a summary of chapter 1. So the summary of chapter 1 will simply summarize what has been discussed in chapter 1. Then that's it for chapter 1. Then we move on to chapter 2, where you talk about, this is where you talk about your literature review. Now, for the purpose of your proposal, please don't be worried of including all the literature review in chapter 2 at this moment. You may not be able to finish all. You may not be able to include all the literature, the relevant literature in chapter 2 now, because you have still a long way to go. But please make sure that you include all the you cover all the important aspects of your research in the literature review. For example, if you've got 1 or 2 theories, make sure those theories are discussed in your literature review. Even though it may not be a very extensive discussion of all the theories, but you have got it covered in the literature review for the proposal. Please do not send a literature review consisting of only 5 pages. That is definitely not enough. Okay, at least you will have halfway through all the literature that you want to include. In your study, they should be there. So put them in your chapter 2 when you submit your proposal, so that the examiners can see the fact that you have already covered, you have read, you know about the main elements or the main variables or the main theories that will be used in this study. Okay? Now, talking about the literature review, it is also very important to highlight the fact that a literature review is not simply a description of literature. Okay? It's not like putting a summary of various articles. It's not that. It's actually a literature review is supposed to be a critical exercise. A critical exercise whereby you look at different literature, you provide description of what has been discussed in the literature, and also you have your own discussion of the literature that you put in your chapter 2, where you argue, where you criticize, where you do synthesis and analysis of the literature that you include in chapter 2. Right. Okay. Then you go to the third chapter of your proposal, which is chapter 3. Now, in chapter 3, again, you will have various sections. First, you will have introduction, and usually, just like what I said earlier for chapter 1 and 2, the introduction section is to introduce the chapter. So this is where you introduce the chapter. You describe what you will be discussing in chapter 3. Sorry. And then you talk about the research design. You talk about the population, samples, participants, subjects, and whatnot. And usually this will be guided by the WH and the 5W and 1H questions. Yeah? The what, who, why, when, where, how. All right. And you will have a section where you actually talk about or discuss the instrument. Please make sure that when you submit your proposal, you have already identified your instrument. Okay. Some students, go to proposal defense without identifying or without having an instrument. You still couldn't find the instrument. Um, I would, I would advise that you must make sure that you already have secured an instrument. Because if you are still looking for the instrument, um, then you go for your proposal. If, let's say, you are able to go for the proposal, then people wouldn't know whether the instrument that you're going to use later on is correct or not. Okay. Um, it doesn't mean that when you have the instrument, you go to proposal defend and the instrument is always right. Sometimes you will have examiners who ask you to use different instrument, but it's fine. At least you know you have the instrument and they can see that okay, this is not suitable or this is suitable. You know, then it will be very helpful for you to carry out your study and to collect the data. So please make sure you have already identified the instrument with your supervisor before you go for your proposal defense. And then include in here your pilot study, where you explain why you need to do your pilot study, who was involved, when it was done, what activities were carried out, and so on and so forth. When you're discussing pilot study. And then, of course, like I said, this is the empirical stage where you stop at data analysis technique. So you have data collection procedures. You discuss what kind of data collection, what kind of data will be collected, how it will be collected, using what kind of procedures, and the discussion on data collection procedures should be detailed. It should be a very detailed discussion. If you have various steps to take, then explain the various steps that you need to take. For example, someone was doing um, um, development study just now. You have uh, needs analysis stage, and then you do survey, and then you collect data, and then you have so many stages of data collection. You have to describe these different stages, these different processes in a very detailed manner so that people, the examiner, when they look at your proposal, they can clearly visualize what kind of activities will be involved, and whether those activities are correctly planned to be done or whether they are not supposed to be done, and things like that. All right. And finally, you will have to identify the kind of the data analysis that you will do, the techniques, what kind of data analysis you are going to carry out. Are you going to do, if you're doing quantitative, for example, are you going to use mean, frequency? Are you going to use, will there be ANOVA test involved, and so on and so forth? It, it has to be clearly stated what kind of data analysis technique will be carried out. And sometimes, in chapter 3, it is also good to have a table where you list out your objective, your research questions, your hypotheses, and then you will have on the right column, you will have the kind of data analysis that you will carry out for each, to achieve the objective, the research objective 1, 2, 3, to test the hypothesis, so people can see the alignment of data analysis with the objective research questions and hypotheses. Okay, right. We talk about design just now, research design. So mainly, of course, we will be most of the time we'll be talking about either qualitative or quantitative research design. And of course, first you have to explain why you want to use. Well, you have to first of all explain that you understand what is qualitative and what is quantitative, the strength, of qualitative, quantitative, and so on and so forth. Then you have to go on and explain why you think that particular research design is more suitable for your study, for your research. So it's very important that you understand the differences between qualitative and quantitative research design. Okay, so yeah, you can have a look at this later on when I share with you these materials. It's a matter. Right. So in chapter 3, like I said just now, you also need to explain your sample. So you need to clearly explain who will be involved in your data collection. Your data will be collected from whom. Okay. And of course, this will also differ slightly if you are doing quantitative or qualitative, because quantitative way of doing sampling would be different from the qualitative way of doing sampling. And you have to make sure that you understand this and you're able to follow whichever route that you have chosen, whichever design that you have chosen, right? Be careful because, for example, if you're doing quantitative, you must make sure that your sampling is correct. Your sampling technique is correct, because in quantitative research, the sampling should always be probabilistic. Okay, most of the time, probabilistic meaning because you want generalizability, right? Meaning everybody will random, meaning random. Everybody will have the same opportunity to be selected as your sample. And the reason why you're doing this is so that you have the correct representatives of the population, and also because you want it to be generalizable, meaning you can generalize the findings to other places later on, right? But sometimes if you you want to look at a relationship between certain variables, then maybe you will use purposive sampling technique to help you identify people who will be able to help you to answer your research questions and research objectives. Of course, for qualitative research, then you will have a variety of sampling techniques, such as this. You can have a look at this quantitative sampling technique that you want to include in your proposal, and also some of these qualitative sampling technique that are available for you to choose from in order for you to select the right people for data collection. But the point is this, the point is you must make sure that you understand why that particular sampling is being used, and you must be able to explain it in your proposal, the document, as well as when you defend your proposal. Some students can write a proposal very well. They wrote everything in the proposal, but they cannot defend when they are asked doing proposal for God knows whatever reason. So please make sure that you really know the sampling techniques of your research when you put them in your proposal, and please make sure that you are able to defend them during the oral defense of the proposal. Okay, so you've done your sampling. You also need to explain how you will carry out, or how you will collect your data. So of course, here you if you're doing quantitative, of course, usually we will use survey questionnaires. You will use certain standardized measuring instruments, for example, and so on and so forth. But you need to decide whether you will be using an existing instrument, or whether you will develop a new instrument. Now, you have to be very careful, yeah? If you use existing instrument, you must make sure that the existing instrument is basically made for the research that you want to do, meaning it will be able to assess whatever you want to assess in that particular research. Okay, but if you say that you want to develop but no, using existing instrument is much easier. Okay, much easier. But of course, sometimes people need to develop their own instruments. So when you develop your instruments, whether it is just one part of the instrument or whether it is the whole instrument, you have to be careful because there is a long process of developing instruments. For example, when we wanted the team wanted to develop the instrument for the research on teacher leadership, I think 6-7 years ago, we took about 2 years to finish developing the instrument because it has to go through a lot of processes. So you have to be you have to be aware of this before you decide on what kind of instrument you want to use. All right. So if you're using an existing instrument, then you need to, in your proposal, you must explain about the history of the instrument, who developed it. For example, a lot of people use Howard Gardner instrument for multiple intelligences. Yeah, a lot of people use that. So if you want to use Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences instrument, then you have to look at the history. Multiple intelligences started with 3 only, 4 only, and then it developed into 5, and then 6. So 6 domain, 6 different domain. So the instrument also become longer and longer. So you need to explain this. You need to give description of the instrument and the history. And you will also need to discuss how it is used in other research. Yeah. If you are developing new instrument, you need to first of all, of course, need to develop an outline of all of the steps that will be involved in coming up with new instrument. Yeah. But you have to include this in your proposal. So if you're doing new instrument, your proposal may be delayed because you need to come up with the proposal and then have it tested and so on and so forth. But if you're doing qualitative research, your qualitative data instrumentation would be you yourself, because the researcher in qualitative research is actually the one who actually go and ask question and write down the answer, and everything is done by the researcher. So the researcher is actually the research instrument, and because the researcher is the research instrument, so meaning the researcher has to be very, very careful to make sure that the researcher does not influence the way the participant think. The researcher does not influence how the participant should answer certain questions, and so on and so forth. All right? Okay. Okay, you're clear about this validity, reliability, but make sure you include this in your proposal. Okay, please make sure you include this in your proposal. Of course, there are various kind of validity that you have to measure. For example, the contentability, the constructability. You have to do this. And again, let me re-emphasize: you need to make sure that you include in your proposal. Okay. Similarly, you also need to have reliability included in your proposal. Yep. Right. Data collection procedures must be also included in the proposal document. This is where you actually explain. I've mentioned this earlier. This is where you have to explain how the data will be collected. If it is a survey instrument, how will you administer the survey instrument? Is it going to be face to face? Are you going to go to school and administer it? Are you going to do uh, are you going to do it in a whole class where you can give the survey to the whole class? Are you going to send it by mail? Are you going to give a Google form? Everything has to be discussed and has to be justified. Yeah. And you also need to talk about, for example, if you're talking about giving out surveys. Yeah. One thing that students sometimes do not discuss is the return rate of survey instruments given to samples. Yeah, they do not talk about return rate. For example, if let's say you send your questionnaire through mail or you send by internet, you have to talk about return rate. Unless you go and meet the person face to face, then it's a different story. But let's say you send it through various channels, mail, email, and so on and so forth. You have to talk about return rate because different ways may have different return rate. And what happens if your return rate is very low? Your target is 600 survey questionnaires answered, but you only have 220. So how do you compensate? What do you need to do? And things like that. Okay. So if you're conducting interviews, you also need to explain how the interview will be carried out, where it will be carried out, by whom, how will the recording be done, what happens after the interview. Do you give back the questions and answers to the interviewee for them to check? And so you have to explain all this. Okay. Similarly, with observation in your proposal, you must explain if your research involves observation. You must explain why observation is needed, what for, how it is going to be carried out, how it is going to be done. Is it going to be done overtly or covertly? So all this has to be discussed. If, let's say, your research will involve studying of documents, okay, studying of documents, then you must include in your proposal about how these documents will be studied and what kind of documents will be studied. Because if you talk about documents, you are talking about various kinds. You are talking about digital documents, non-digital documents, you're talking about personal documents, non-personal official documents. You have to explain and you have to clarify why these documents are needed. Rationale should be there. This is especially true for students who are doing qualitative research. They may need to do a lot of document study. Okay. Right. Then after you have discussed your data collection, definitely you will have to talk about your data analysis. You have to talk about how your data will be analyzed. What methods of analysis will you be used? For example, in quantitative research, are you going to use descriptive statistics? Are you going to use correlational statistics? Are you going to use statistical significance, inferential, and so on and so forth? It has to be explained again together with the justification of why this kind of analysis is being used. If you're doing qualitative, what kind of analysis you will use? Um, students sometimes, um, when they write the data analysis for qualitative research, it's quite similar with quantitative sometimes. They sometimes write data will be analyzed using NVivo, or data will be analyzed using SPSS version 29 or whatever. That is wrong. Okay, NVivo, they are not a data analysis. They are just tools to manage data. But what it means here is, what kind of analysis means here is the method of analysis, yeah, not the tools. The tools is not important, SPSS or whatever that you're going to use, it's not important. But the analysis method is important. We need to know, okay, whether it's grounded theory, automatic analysis, constant comparative, or whatever. Right. Now, so those would be the things that you must include in your proposal when you're preparing your proposal. First, talking about judging the proposal. Here, what it means here is we are looking at, okay, how will you be judged during your proposal? When you submit your proposal. There are a few things that the examiner will be looking at. Number one, is your proposed research feasible and doable? That's one thing that they would look at. Okay, whether your proposed research is something that can be done. Sometimes, we want to do research, we want to do something fantastic, and we put something that cannot be done. So, of course, the examiner will tell you that this is something that you will not be able to do. You will have to change the proposal here and there, modify it a bit so that it becomes better and doable and things like that. Okay. Number two is the research worth doing. Worth doing meaning you should spend your time and money and energy to do this research. So that's why I said it should be something that is current and that is very interesting to people. If the topic is not current, then it becomes something that is not useful. It's something that is not interesting, and then people may say that the research is not worth doing. So that is another thing that people will look at. Can the candidate do it? Okay. For example, the examiner and also the supervisor will judge whether, with this kind of research, using this kind of model, with this kind of types of analysis, does the candidate has enough knowledge, skill, whatever, to do the research or not? So that's why sometimes the examiner or the supervisor will tell you, okay, you can do this proposal, but I need you to attend this course, PLS, please attend this course because because the supervisor or the examiner feel that you as the candidate may find it a bit difficult to do it because of lack of knowledge, skills, and so on and so forth. Okay. And finally, another thing that the examiner and supervisor will be looking at would be, if let's say this research is done, will it be able to produce a successful dissertation at the level that you are in? For example, if you're a PhD student, will you be able to produce a successful dissertation at the PhD level, at the master level, at the master mode A level, and so on and so forth. So this is another reason why some supervisors, including myself, hold students' proposal and not allow them to go and present or defend first, because the common words that I would use would be, it is not yet up to the level of PhD or the level of EDD or the level of Mode A. This is it, So that's why sometimes you get, advice from your supervisors, okay, no, you don't go and present yet. You're still not up there yet. So please listen and make sure that you improve and make sure that your proposal is up to the level. Okay. So finally, you are ready to present. So please remember, whether you like your supervisor or not, please give credit to your supervisor. Okay? Give credit to your supervisor. Because if he or she allows you to defend your proposal, meaning the supervisor believes that you are quite ready. You may not be fully ready, but you're quite ready. So give credit to your supervisors, listen to your supervisors, and follow his or her advice. And because this research is not your supervisor's research, it is your research. So make sure you really know about the research. You really know what the research is all about. Please make sure that during the proposal defense, you answer on your behalf. You may have a decision made based on the discussion with your supervisors, but in the end, the decision is yours. Because I have many cases where students say in proposal defense, oh, I don't know, examiner asks, why do you use this technique? Oh, I don't know, my supervisor asked me to use this technique. That is totally wrong. You shouldn't be responding that way. It's your decision, it's your research, so own it. Be responsible to your research. Yes, you may have discussion with your supervisor. Your supervisor may have advised you and whatnot, but this is yours, right? So do not blame other people about your research. Okay, so yeah. Sorry. Okay, so for the proposal defense, you need to prepare a PowerPoint slide for a 20-minute presentation. So that should answer the questions of how long your presentation will be. You will be given 20 minutes to present. Okay, so when you prepare your presentation slides, please make sure that you do not put too many text in your slides. Okay, do not. Some students like to copy paste from their sentences from their proposal and put it in the slide. Please do not do that. Use your own words to orally explain, just keywords or important words only in the slide. The rest come from your oral presentation. And make sure that please test by projecting your PowerPoint, because sometimes the wrong color usage also cause issues or problems to the examiners and supervisors, because they use very strong color and people cannot read whatever is written. A red background, black wording, people can't read. So the best advice is use light colors background with minimal designs, not so much design. Okay? And please remember that 20 minutes is only for your presentation, because at the end of your 20 minutes presentation, you will have a Q&A session. And this is the most important part, because you will be asked about your presentation, you'll be questioned and you have to defend. Okay? Right. So this is the guideline of how to prepare the slides. It's just a guideline, but you can use this as the guideline lah. You have the title page, your name. Please remember to put your name and your ID, your program, and please do not forget your supervisor's name. If you have not yet learned how to spell your supervisor's name correctly, please learn to spell correctly and the rest. Okay? So when you want to start your proposal presentation, please don't worry. Just be confident, because remember, this is your research. Just stay calm and don't show that you're nervous. So don't hold a paper and start shaking. It's not good. So I don't have to teach you this. You know what to do. Start by thanking the committee for allowing you to present the proposal. Make sure you learn their names. Make sure you find out who they are. Usually there will be one chairperson, two examiners, and your supervisors, and sometimes we invite students. So please make sure you know the names of these people, yeah? The chairperson, the examiners, and most importantly, the name of your supervisor. Okay, start by thanking them, and then second thing, introduce yourself. Who are you? Okay, right? And if you have, please make sure you print out an outline of your presentation so that you can share with the people during your proposal presentation. And this one also, I don't have to read out to you. I'm sure you know you have been doing a lot of presentation. Please do not read from the slide. You just explain orally based on your understanding. Just explain to them without reading from your slides. Okay, and make sure you speak without ranting, without going winding round and round. So just tell your story. What the research is all about. What is the research, or what are the research questions? Why is the research so important to you and to various people? And what are you trying to answer from the research questions? And during the Q&A session, please make sure that you write down all the comments that were given by the examiners. Okay? Make sure you learn from them, because if you don't know anything, you can ask from, because they are there to help you. So, get their advice, listen to what they have to say, take down notes. And if you have something that you are not clear about, please ask for clarification politely. Do not show anger, even though, sometimes examiners may provoke you. Please do not show your anger, and never show any negative emotion. Examiners will sometimes provoke you, but it's normal. So don't take heart. Just play along, and always accept all the blames and take the responsibility, and never ask your supervisor to answer for you, or blame the supervisor when you cannot answer certain questions. All right? So after the Q&A, you'll be asked to go out, and then they will discuss, and then they will call you back. You and your supervisor will have to go out, and then they call you back, and they tell you the result. So when they tell you the result, please listen carefully and understand what is the result. You pass, okay. Do you have to do any correction? Do you have to re-defend? What? Listen carefully so that you're clear about the verdict. And make sure you follow the conditions of the verdict. If the verdict says correction 3 weeks, 3 months, whatever, make sure you follow the time given. Okay? And make sure you start your discussion immediately with your supervisor after the proposal defense, and do all the changes that are required for you to do. Okay? So final words from me is, make sure you practice your proposal defense in front of a mirror or in front of a friend or in front of your supervisor, even better. Make sure you prepare early. Don't wait until the very last minute to prepare your proposal, because that would be a disaster for you, right? So